Is this recording?
You are about to watch an episode of my awesome new series,
Debunk
Debunked. If I do
transgender
say so myself.
ideology.
Seriously, we are very proud of this show. Every episode, I dismantle and debunk a common leftist myth in 15 minutes or less. If you like what you see, head on over to dailywire.com/subscribe.
Just how idiotic can one be to think that everything that's left is bad and everything that's right is good? You got to be just a complete moron, which of course is what Ben Shapiro exactly is.
Use promo code DEBUNKED for 20% off. Become a member to change the entire first season. This sneak peek. Today on Debunked, we're going to discuss a very common question. Can a man be a woman?
Dr. Levine, do you believe that minors are capable of making such a life-changing decision as changing one's sex?
Well, Senator, thank you for your interest in this question. Transgender medicine is a very complex and nuanced field.
The specific question was about minors. Let's be a little more specific since you evaded the question. Do you support the government intervening to override the parent's consent to give a child puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and/or amputation surgery of breasts and genitalia?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty thorny issue. I don't particularly feel comfortable about that. I'm really not certain that I would. Especially like if it's against parental consent. I mean, even with parental consent, I consider it like pretty iffy. Like I know that people are saying like, yeah, you know that you're a woman, whatever, but at the same time, I'd say like, what if you suddenly change your mind? You know, like I don't know, I don't know. To me, it seems like what I'm saying is that people should try to transcend their sex, not try to be some other, like I don't feel particularly like a man. I don't feel particularly like a woman either. Like I wouldn't, if I was like in the body of a woman, it would be kind of weird, but I mean, I could be one too, and it wouldn't really, I would just feel kind of a bit awkward like I do now, and that like, so the point is, I mean, I could do it, but there wouldn't be much point because in any case, I would try to act in a way that's just me and just rational and that doesn't have any relationship with what my biological sex is. I mean, biological, whether it be like, the actual genetic coding or the actual phenotype, the appearance. Um, I think you should act in a way that is, that doesn't have anything to do with the way you look. And I know, yeah, I know that like some way, I mean, our minds are are constructed in such a way that it like seems a bit weird if you act in a way that like is very typical of the opposite sex than what you look like. So which is why people want to do these surgeries, and I can understand that. But um, I would overall urge people to resist the temptation to do that. But yeah, on the other hand, I mean, I can see because there's this puberty blocker stuff, and obviously, like, it's a lot hard. I mean, you'll look a lot more like a woman if you actually, like, for instance, if you're a boy and you want to be a girl, well, obviously you'll make a much more convincing girl, if you change before puberty, and I mean, I can definitely understand why someone might be tempted to do that. But it's true that that would require being able to consent. And again, I mean, if my position, of course, here is if we're allowing kids to make that kind of a decision, then we should also allow kids to have sex. I mean, literally, because I mean, the whole idea is that for not allowing kids to have sex is that like, oh, kids aren't really able to understand the full consequences of their actions, and so there might be like bad things that happen to them as a result. But like this is even something that has even much more consequences. So obviously, if to be consistent, if we're allowing kids to have their say on whether they want to have this kind of treatment done to them, then we absolutely have to legalize sex for children. That's the only way to be consistent.
Senator, transgender medicine is a very complex...
The answer, clearly, is yes, as Levine even told a former Trump administration official. Just pause on that for a moment and think about how crazy that is.
Oh god, I'm sick of these ads. Ben Shapiro is giving me massive ads, so I'm switching over to Firefox, to which I've now added ad block. I'm not giving Ben Shapiro money through ad revenue.
The simple reality is boys and as Levine even...
All right.
Now, in the past few years, you've heard a lot of statements that sound like, we must not raise boys.
But the problem is that they're going much too far. Like, I can see why it might be problematic, to let a kid make such an important decision. But on the other hand, if that kid really is like, it really considers itself like the opposite sex, we're gonna cause quite a bit of harm, by letting that person develop in a way that it doesn't want to.
As boys and girls as girls, because we just can't be sure that kids actually have the sex assigned to them at birth. You've heard that some people are men in women's bodies or women in men's bodies.
But yeah, again, we're not actually saying that biologically there's like some sort of like man hiding inside a woman's body or vice versa, right? It's not that. It's just that the brain of that person is created in such a way, is formed in such a way that it feels like the opposite sex of what it actually is. What is a problem?
You may even have heard that if you're a straight dude and you don't want to have sex with a trans woman, meaning a biological male, this makes you gay. All of this is insane, patent nonsense.
Like he's just making a big deal out of nothing. He's like literally, what he's saying is that basically he doesn't want to give people the freedom to do whatever they want with their own bodies. See, abortion, I agree. Abortion is completely different because there you've got another living organism inside you and another soul inside you, at least from starting at a certain age. So that is a completely different issue because it's not just about your body, it's also someone else's body. But transgenderism here is entirely your body. So he like literally wants the government to control people's bodies again, which is so ironic how they complain about, big government interfering into people's lives. And actually, that is exactly what Republicans want.
Males and females reproduce with one another in the human species. We've known this for quite a while. The simple reality is that the human...
Again, he's just bringing up, it's a red herring, or it's irrelevant. He's just bringing this up. It's not irrelevant.
Species is sexually dimorphic. Yeah. Sex is binary. We come in two brands, male.
Okay, yeah, sure. But how does that have any bearing on the fact that some people might not want to be like that? They might want to be different. Why aren't you okay with the fact that some people might want to be different?
And female. Typically, those who have the XY chromosomes are male. Those who have XX chromosomes are female. Males and...
What a fucking idiot. I just hate Ben Shapiro.
Females differ. They differ in size and shape, and musculature,
I hate
brain
Ben
function.
Shapiro.
As neuroscientist Steven Pinker says, differences between the sexes are part of the human condition.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be. Like, literally, it's like saying that smallpox is part of the human condition. And, oh, why are you complaining about smallpox? It's part of the human condition. It's evolved to specifically infect humans. What are you trying to do playing with the natural order? And, how are you being anti-science, trying to claim that smallpox doesn't exist even, maybe, with your dastardly vaccines?
There are certainly people who have anomalous genetic conditions, like Klinefelter syndrome,
in
which a person has two X chromosomes and a Y chromosome, and in whom breast development looks female while male genitalia are present.
Yes.
Overall, disorders of sexual development affect 1 in every 5,000 births. Now, the presence of abnormal development does not mean that sex is a spectrum. To suggest otherwise, it would be the same thing as saying that because one child every few thousand is born with 3 toes.
Actual biological sex is not a spectrum. On the other hand, the actual characteristics that beyond the actual, things like X and Y, but the characteristics that are somewhat associated with sex do exist on a spectrum. And so that includes things like size, that includes things like strength, and that includes things like all sorts of character traits. There are plenty of women who have like character traits that are more masculine than the average male, and vice versa. And so basically, what Ben is trying to do here is, without actually openly saying so, he's trying to basically make you kind of forget that and to really see people as just being binary. And he's literally doing what he accuses leftists of doing on race, and what he's doing is he's creating basically he's creating two groups of people, and he wants to pigeonhole these people into two groups. He's doing exactly what all these identity politicians are doing, and it's just so incredibly ironic.
Toes. This means that the number of toes in the human being is a spectrum, or that a person with 3 toes might actually be a sloth human, a 3-toed sloth human.
What?
All reproduction is rooted in the presence of sexual dimorphism. To pretend otherwise,
no, not true. There are hermaphroditic organisms. There are like plenty of plants who have like literally the female and male organs on the same organism. So like no, not all reproduction is based on that. Of course, there's asexual reproduction. So and there are lots of species which might have things, there are lots of species which do have separate sexes, but that don't have any particular sexual dimorphism. Like already, like cats, they don't have a huge amount of sexual dimorphism in terms of morphology. And for instance, I don't know, I'm thinking like what, like a crow. Crows don't have any visible sexual dimorphism. There might be minute differences in average size, but like basically there isn't much difference. Dogs also don't have much sexual dimorphism, a little bit, but like literally it's not all that much of a thing, like beyond the actual genitalia, And of course, like I've said, there are hermaphroditic organisms. And like I said, the whole issue of having separate sexes is actually a result of basically a mistake. It's the result of basically stronger organisms cheating their way out of their duty to fulfill the female reproductive function, because that way it allows them to spread their genes more efficiently by just doing the male function. That's literally the result. So like literally, it's the result of cheating that there are separate sexes. Although of course it's not an intentional cheating done by any particular individual, right? It's just a phenomenon that happens.
Is biologically nonsensical. That's why, to
Oh,
end
right. Yeah, you show two completely different species of macaw to pretend that there's sexual dimorphism, when, like, literally, there is no sexual dimorphism between those macaws. Like, literally, there's no sexual dimorphism between macaws, and you show two completely different macaws, and you sort of do that to pretend that, to, like, show that as an example of sexual dimorphism. Wow. Wow.
Conversation on transgenderism, just ask for a simple, non-self-referential definition of the terms man and woman.
Like literally, you see, because I'm a bird watcher, so I actually know this shit. It's like the blue and yellow macaw and the great green macaw, right? So you've got the blue and yellow macaw. It has like zero sexual dimorphism. They like, look, here is a pair of blue and yellow macaw. They look like exactly the fucking same. And meanwhile, then there's the great green macaw, which I saw it too quickly. There's that. There's also the military macaw that looks kind of like that. Again, they look exactly the same between male and female. There might be like some minute difference, like in the exact, amount of like some color somewhere, but like they're almost exactly the same. Here, that is a scarlet macaw here. These are not like male and female. These are not, yeah, there are other pairs. There's the eclectus parrot, which looks completely different between male and female. But like, just showing you that he's an idiot, okay? What an idiot. Wait.
Now, in the past few years, you've heard a lot of statements that sound like
I was walking out. I was looking
there
at
are
the wrong thing.
signs of abnormal development does not mean that sex is a. That's why, to end a conversation on transgenderism, just ask for a simple, non-self-referential definition of the terms man and woman. When I say non-self-referential, I mean you can't say, I feel like a woman, therefore I am a woman. For advocates of biology, the answer for what is woman.
And again, remember that like half of Ben Shapiro fans are like probably creationists, or certainly half of the people who hold the same ideology as Ben Shapiro, more than half are creationists who don't believe at all in things like evolution and stuff like that, right?
Or what is man is simple. You can look at chromosomes, SRY genes, reproductive systems, verifiable answers to the question. For advocates of the position that some biological men are women, or vice versa, there is no standard that can be applied. A man can become a woman.
The point is, who cares? The point is, fundamentally, who the hell cares? If they want to be like treated like a man or a woman, then just let them. In any case, people should be treated exactly the same, regardless of whatever they are. So, like, you're literally, again, advocating for discrimination, for apartheid. Well, not actual apartheid, but like a two-tiered system of like literally not holding people to the same standards.
A woman or man at any time without any stable definition of man or woman whatsoever.
Why are you so obsessed over this? Like, literally,
so according to our
just let people do this.
Pseudo-medical activists, gender identity is completely separate from sex. The separation between gender and sex relies on a simple fallacy, that gender is entirely socially constructed and thus separate from biology. Gender, in this iteration, would be all the various feminine qualities that adhere to womanhood, or the masculine qualities that adhere to being a male. According to these folks, gender and sex are completely different. Right? All of those gendered notions of femininity, they're completely separate from being a biological...
Yeah, now we can admit that there's some people who are stupidly claiming that there's no innate biologically determined differences between the average behaviors between sexes, which that is nonsense.
Female. This Cartesian notion that you can be a woman in a man's body, a soul in the machine, because your gender is separate from your sex, is utterly unsupportable at any level. Everyone understands there are some attributes that are generally considered more masculine. Chopping wood, being dumb.
I'm whizzing with the door open, and I love it.
And some that are considered more feminine, being caring, being nice, right? These are distinctions that do appear in virtually all cultures. Some of that is undoubtedly biologically oriented, and some is undoubtedly social construction. But it is simply ridiculous to suggest that if a boy is effeminate, he's actually a girl, or that if a girl is masculine, she might actually be a boy.
Yeah, sure. Like, obviously, but I don't think... Like, I know some people are suggesting that. The problem is that you go way too far the other way, and what you end up doing is you end up basically discriminating against the kind of people who just want to change their sex if they want to. Like, why?
But this is what gender theorists argue.
Yeah, and again, gender theorists are idiots. The problem is that you are an idiot too.
The origins of the gender identity movement lie with a professor of medical psychology at Johns Hopkins in the 1960s. His name was John Money. After twin boys were born, and after a botched circumcision destroyed one boy's penis, that boy was raised as a girl.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that. But then he didn't feel right about that, and he actually committed suicide when he learned, and then he.
When he was a teenager, the boy felt extraordinary discomfort because he was biologically male, and his parents told him the truth. Both twins ended up killing themselves in their mid-30s.
Oh, both?
That didn't stop John Money from...
Yeah, okay, but so why? So that is for some reason a really bad thing for you. But on the other hand, if somebody has a brain that literally functions like the opposite sex, then that isn't for some reason something that is worthy of like considering traumatic. I don't understand like why you're like literally making the argument that the pro-transgender people do, but you're just applying it for an anti-transgender cause. Like
founding the Johns.
Again, Mr. so-called facts don't care about your feelings. Mr. I'm logical. Mr. I'm definitely a Mr. and not a Mrs.
Hopkins Gender Identity Clinic in 1965. His theory was children could identify as members of the opposite sex, and that radical surgery was the proper solution. That inside, these kids were members of the opposite sex.
Well, like, it kind of, in a way, that kind of makes sense. Like, literally, if changing a person who felt like a boy to a girl caused lots of mental trauma, then presumably just being in the body of the opposite sex in what fields would also cause that kind of trauma. And like logically, it would make sense to change the body so as to conform to what the brain feels like.
In reality, and that surgery would merely make their bodies align with their identity. Money claims that, quote, the gender identity gate is open at birth for a normal child, no less than for one born with unfinished sex organs, and would stay that way for at least a year. So in other words, you could have a full biological boy with finished sex organs, and his gender identity was still open. Brains and
again, botched circumcision. Again, an argument not to do circumcisions. Circumcision is genital mutilation. Honestly, if you want to like complain about genital mutilation, then please fight circumcision. Circumcision is not particularly useful. Supposedly, yeah, at least you like some better, like sexual health outcomes. But again, it's probably also just largely result of like, you know, other factors such as like ungood, like genital health beyond that, beyond the fact that one has been circumcised. So anyway, this is silly.
Bodies were considered in direct opposition, completely separate from one another. Radical feminists like Judith Butler began arguing that all gender was socially constructed, and that therefore all inequalities in outcome between men and women could be laid at the feet of an evil, sexist society. If gender is a meaningless social construct created by society, why does it matter more than sex, which is actual real biology? And why is gender more real than biology itself? Why would anyone need to change his or her body in order to align with gender, a social construction, when gender and sex are completely separate in the first place? Gender dysphoria, which is what we're talking about here, is a serious and tragic disorder. It is also extremely rare.
Yeah, it's pretty rare. It's not that extremely rare. Like it's obviously not most people don't have it, but quite a few do. And like why not just let a person live according to that dysphoria? Like why not let a person change its body, right?
According to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual 5th edition, those who had received a diagnosis of gender identity disorder or transsexualism and were seeking hormone treatment and or surgery represented just 0.005 to 0.014% for males and 0.002 to 0.003% for females.
Yeah, except that lots of them probably didn't ever go seek any treatment.
Those stats are now rising dramatically.
Yeah.
We have that big announcement from an Oscar-nominated actor.
They are rising, and if they're rising, again, if you're the kind of person who thinks that, this stuff is biologically determined, then logically, this isn't, it's people who suddenly think this, but more that it's people who finally are daring to speak up, right? Because until now, it was taboo. Now, it's not like it's non-taboo to be transgender. Like, there's still lots of opposition to it. That people know that they'll get, like, they'll suffer from it. So I don't think people are just going like, oh, yeah, I'm actually transgender and this is going to be so cool. No, it's a serious thing. And, like, the rates that we're seeing now are closer to the actual rates.
Announcing he is transgender. Elliot Page came out publicly with a post about his identity.
And in that post, now liked nearly 2.5 million times. The more I hold myself close and fully embrace who I am, the more I dream, the more my heart grows, and the more I thrive. And guys, that's what we love to see.
Yes, he is going to help so many. Janae, thank you so much.
People suffering from gender dysphoria, which, in its non-politicized definition, means the persistent belief that you are a member of the opposite sex, have a tragically high suicidal ideation and depression rate.
Yeah, how about because precisely you feel like you're in the wrong fucking sex and that you're being hated on by idiots like Ben Shapiro.
That suicidal ideation rate remains tragically high after surgical and hormonal treatment. Longitudinal studies that are...
Okay, so that debunks the first aspect, not the second, which is that you're still being hated on. You're hated on by people like Ben Shapiro. And the fact that obviously, like, just how should we explain? The fact that you had to transition in the first place means that obviously you're never, like, a true whatever you feel like, right? You still know that chromosomically you're the other sex, and so you're still unhappy because of that. I don't see why you shouldn't still let people change sex. Like, obviously, if people are still just as unhappy afterwards, it sort of indicates that there's not much point in changing. But, like, why should we prevent them from doing so? What if that is their choice? Let us just follow their choice. Again, I'm not necessarily saying it's a good idea. In fact, I don't think it's a good idea because I think that any sort of sexual identification to anything is basically a bad thing. It should always be kind of superficial. You can sort of act like a boy or like a girl, but it should always be kind of like a game, It's like you're just playing a character in a game and you're not actually taking it seriously.
Good just do not exist on the efficacy of these measures. And the mental health problems associated with gender dysphoria remain extremely damaging, even in particularly accepting societies. But suffering from a mental disorder does not change your underlying sex, any more than believing that you are Napoleon Bonaparte makes you Napoleon Bonaparte. Transgender activists make an objective claim.
Again, we're not saying that they're biologically become the other sex, but we're just saying that maybe we're gonna perceive them as the other sex. And again, like I've said, once again, I urge people to not perceive people like any sex, but just perceive them as individuals.
About reality, based on subjective internal feelings. That's unsustainable.
Memories.
What's more, transgender activists demand that you abandon reason, biology, privacy, even the ability to raise your kids in concert with reality in favor of a delusional quasi-religious worldview in which
again, he's just completely dramatic. Like, he's just such a drama queen.
Gender and sex are completely segregated, and a boy can be a girl and a girl a boy.
Ben claims to be a real boy, and that real boys are only real boys, and that genetic males are only males ever, and yet somehow Ben Shapiro is at the same time a drama queen. How amazing. How wondrous.
Now, none of this means that anybody suffering from gender dysphoria ought to be mistreated. Anybody with any sort of disorder ought to be treated with nothing but sympathy and care.
Thank you.
This does mean that a society that seeks to propagandize to children that they can switch their gender is both lying to kids and doing them psychological harm in the process. Unfortunately, that's exactly what our society is now teaching kids in public schools. Anti-biological nonsense, including the lie that you might just be a different gender with different pronouns. And it's not just that. With the new Equality Act...
Look, all I can say is that from my own experience, I haven't felt any sort of harm or oppression from, like, pro-transgenderism. And on the other hand, I know I felt plenty of harm from, like, stereotypical norms of how boys should behave. So, like, literally, and that is what in practice, that is what you're going to perpetuate by doing this kind of shit.
Motion is adopted.
The Biden administration and the Democratic Party are seeking to promote the idea that any institution that doesn't mimic these lies has to be destroyed. Religious institutions are not exempted from federal regulations that demand that men who identify as women be treated as women. And this is true in sports, in restrooms. Ironically, feminists who sought to protect women from men have now seen female spaces completely destroyed because they can't define female and male properly. Most shockingly, we're now a society that demands that parents hand over their kids to the tender mercies of political actors masquerading as medical specialists. If you have a 12-year-old at school with a headache, the school nurse cannot prescribe to them Tylenol without calling you first. But we now have officials in states and in the federal government suggesting that if a 12-year-old says that she is a boy, the school should be able to prescribe puberty blockers without calling a parent. That is...
Yeah, I know, and that is very much a problem, and I don't think there is a good solution really to that. And like I've said, the only good solution is a long term with just eliminating separate sexes.
It's a sick society. In the end, a man claiming to be a woman is making an unsustainable claim. He can't even know what it is like to be a woman because he is not one. A man with surgeries and hormone treatment does not become a woman, nor does a man who simply declares himself a woman. All of this is insane propaganda and is being propagated for political purposes. So, no, a man cannot become a woman or a woman a man. Alrighty, folks, if you enjoy...
So sleazy that bit. Okay, stop recording.